Welcome to Unleashed, the podcast where we redefine leadership by focusing on what truly matters, the people driving change. Change leadership is about guiding people through transformation in a way that inspires them to embrace change because they believe in it. Whether you're a leader looking to foster a culture of growth or someone eager to break through barriers in life and business, this podcast is for you. Now our host, Wendi.
Welcome to the Unleashed podcast. I'm Wendi, and I'm your host. Scott McGohan has spent over 35 years shaping leadership, culture, and mental health advocacy in the workplace. As the recently retired co-chairman of McGohan and Brabender, author of Culture is an Inside Job, and founder of newest adventure, One Morning. He's on a mission to inspire self-awareness, authenticity, and real cultural change. A passionate believer in love, acceptance, and vulnerability, Scott is here to challenge the way we think about leadership from the inside out. Scott, welcome to Unleashed.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
It is a pleasure. Before we hit record, we had a few conversations that I should have just hit record because we had some great conversation before. But I'm really looking forward to this podcast because I think your passion for just making the world a better place is just really inspiring. So I want to dig in, first of all, to just kind of how you got here. So, you said before I hit record that you retired and then you immediately started a company. So let's start with that.
Yeah, and it really is probably a reference point of like where I got where I am. So, I have a deep, compelling purpose to be on a quest for the lonely, tired, broken, and afraid, because I was there for the majority of my life. And I was really afraid to tell people that I was lonely, tired, broken, and afraid. And I stood in nice clothes and I drove nice cars and I lived in a nice house and I had a second home and I had a big job. But ultimately I was just a little boy that never grew up, and I was full of ego and vanity and all kinds of destructive behaviors. And I never really understood the willingness of saying, I don't know how to figure this out. And when I finally just gave up and surrendered and went back and rebuilt myself from the inside out, beautiful things happened in my life. Because as a leader, what I did, unfortunately, is I built myself from the outside in. So I felt like if it was the clothes that I wore, the car that I drove, and I had a really warped sense of, I thought self-worth equaled performance the faster I went, plus your opinion of me equaled self-worth. So in other words, your opinion of me meant more than my own opinion of myself. And that's a very lonely place to live. And so One Morning is really an authentic storytelling catalyst to bring authentic mental health, to bring that alive inside of an employer. And we do that all through storytelling, and I love it. And it doesn't even feel like work. Yeah. I'm having a blast.
So, you spent your whole life work doing this, and then you quote unquote retired. And then why did you choose to not actually retire?
I think I talked to my wife because my wife, she's my best friend. We've been married 38 years. And it was like, hey, I'll follow you you followed me and I'll follow you. And she loves to restore houses and different things. She's really good at it. And I had this vision, and my son's a filmmaker, and we were talking about it. And she said, hey, why don't you start this thing and then we'll start it with our family. And that would be really kind of a cool thing to do. So our family's involved. We love doing it. I've got tons of energy. So I really think slowing down is like that doesn't end well.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, it just doesn't. It doesn't end well for, a lot of different people. And I don't know. I just really feel like that's where God wants me to play right now. I think that's where he wants me to play is, he found me in my brokenness. And I think he said, hey, Tiger, why don't you go find some other, broken people and do it in a loving, beautiful way.
Well, and if there's one thing I've learned, and it sounds like you are continuing to learn the same thing, is uh, what he calls us to do, what God calls us to do, he's already equipped us to do. And so, share with us your latest venture one morning.
Yeah. So before I left McGohan Brabender, by the way, like I wasn't ready to retire. So for those leaders out there, I think what's really important for them to understand, your number one job as a leader is to find the person that's going to sit in your chair. You've got to find that next person.
Yeah.
And that's your number one job. And so we found those people. Mike Sutman, who was the president, and I was the CEO. There were two people, and they were ready, and we weren't. But here's the problem: if you don't put them in the chair, they'll go somewhere else and lead.
Mm,
And then when you're ready, you don't have the people there, and
mm,
then now you're stuck, and that's bad for the company, and that's bad for you.
yeah.
So then you're forced to make a call, and it's a good call because it's good for you and it's good for the organization. So we transitioned into this awesome new team, full of energy, full of excitement. And that took a long time. So that took a lot of time for us to make full acceptance and like, hey, are we really ready to do this? And we did that. But before I left, I wanted to bring mental health to life inside of our company. And this might be a long story if that's okay.
That's fantastic.
So what happened is I wanted to find an employee assistance program that really kind of knocked down a bunch of barriers. So a therapist I could text, a therapist I could call, a therapist I could chat with, maybe a therapist that if I wanted to talk to a therapist that was Catholic or Muslim or Black or Jewish, like all of those barriers, they would find those therapists for me. So all of
Mm,
the barriers were lifted away. And then I'm a big believer in storytelling. I think people embrace stories. So when I was 43, 18 years ago, in this house, and I got down on my knees and I told God to take away the pain or I was going to take it away myself.
wow.
So that was 18 years ago. And I wanted to die. Beautiful wife, two beautiful kids, all kinds of things going for me on the outside, but on the inside, I was just dead. And by the grace of God, I walked into these recovery rooms in Dayton, Ohio, and said, "My name's Scott, and my soul's cooked,"
Mm,
and that's what I did. And 18 years later, I just found so much redemption and restoration, and so much peace and serenity, and so much exploration and self-awareness, and just so much beauty, and all of that stuff. And so I say that because I told that story in front of our workforce. So we had 275 people. And I said, look, this is where I was. And this is where I was at my bottom.
and were
And I'm
people
really,
shocked, Scott? I mean, when you stood up in front of these 270 people, did they know, or were they like, "Whoa, wait"?
yeah, I had no idea.
Wow.
Yeah. Matter of fact, when that happened, I tore the shirt sleeve off my suit. I don't know why. There was a tear in it. And I threw it on my counter in my closet that's upstairs. And today that shirt sleeve sits on this counter where I pray in the morning, and then 18 years of recovery tokens sit on top of it. So I get to see like the bottom, and then I get to see like the top of that. And I showed the workforce that shirt sleeve. I'm like, this is what the bottom looks like. Because when you're there, the bottom can be beautiful, but when you're there, you can either dig or you can climb. And so, but I asked other people, like, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for people that are willing to tell brave stories. And I want to brave stories about taboo subjects like miscarriage.
Mm,
I want stories around people that are terrified of their mailbox because a letter from an IRS or a bill they can't pay or domestic violence. And I had 8 people raise their hand and say, I'll tell my story. So I sat in my office with my iPhone and I sat on a couch and we just told stories. And I kind of put together an email and sent those stories out to the workforce. And it was called "It's Okay, I'm Okay." And it was just stories of people telling stories about humanity, about struggle, and where they were and where they are today. And at the time, our EAP utilization was 4%. And in 16 weeks, it went to 38%. And then the whole workforce, like really cool things began to happen. And I was like, wow, I think I'm onto something here. So let's bring this to light. So we hired a really cool branding company. We were thinking of names and thinking of names and thinking of names, and then they said, well, tell us that story again. And I was like, well, one morning. And they're like, one morning. So one morning, and I was like, one morning. So that's the
Mm.
name of the organization. And so we just do that through storytelling. I'm so excited about the content. And we remove all the labels. So instead of calling it like alcoholism, we would tell a story about why do I embarrass myself when I drink? Or when we talk about Alzheimer's or dementia and what happens, we might say, why did my mom forget my name? So we bring the real story to the table.
Mm.
Because as employers, what they have to realize is all of those problems come in your front door. Like employers, like all of those issues, they land and they're like some employers think, well, the people don't bring those problems in the workplace. Yeah, they do.
Mm.
They come in the workplace. And when you bring a sense of belonging to that, when you tell a single mom that she's allowed to bring the fact that her son's being bullied at school into the workplace, and she's allowed to bring that sadness into the workplace, and you give her an outlet to bring that in, you will change her life and her son's life. And beautiful things can happen and all of that. And that's what One Morning does.
Mm. So I have so many thoughts around this, uh, Scott, because I got to admit I'm conflicted, and my
Mhm.
guess is we have a lot of listeners who are leaders in organizations who are listening to this, going, "Hold on a minute, what you were able to do, and what kind of industry were you in when this came to light?"
Healthcare. So employee benefits,
Okay, employee benefits
consulting.
and healthcare.
Yep.
Okay, got it. So, you are not only standing in front of your 275 people, being vulnerable and open about what your struggles have been. I love the analogy of the rip in your shirt. That's incredible. There's risk in being a leader and saying, "Hey, I want you to bring your true self to work." Because really, and maybe I'm old school. I was taught from very early on, you leave your trash at the door. I mean, we literally, and I taught that for years. When you come in, we had a mantra. It's showtime, because we were in customer experience, and customers don't really care about your problems. You need to put that aside. You need to be showtime, and you need to give them the best possible customer experience. So I think and I think this is changing in the workplace. My guess is we have some leaders that go, "I don't want people to bring their stuff into the workplace."
Hmm.
How would you
Yeah.
respond to that?
But it's there whether you like it or not. It's there whether you like, and when you bring that to light, now as human beings, we really understand, especially when we're customer facing, like that, like our people intuitively understand that, like I can be sad, but I'm meeting with a customer, and I can still bring myself to light. I can still bring professionalism to light. So I can still represent the brand. I can still represent the organization. Like I can still do that. But when I have permission, maybe when I'm at my desk or I'm talking to my manager or I'm sitting at the lunch table and I'm talking to somebody else, and I can talk about what's happening in my life. Like that's the sense of it. It isn't this sappy, like kumbaya, right? It is like we are still an organization. There is still work to be done.
Right.
But there is a beautiful sense of belonging, of letting people know we understand. And as leaders, I had someone tell me one time, you're way too vulnerable. It makes you look weak. And I said, that's the weakest thing I've ever heard in my life. And they said, I don't understand. Explain it to me. And I said, not today. And I was like, they were like, why? And I'm like, you're going to sit in that. And because I believe vulnerability is probably one of the greatest gifts that we can give people, because everybody's dealing with something. Everybody's dealing with something.
Mm.
And when we're vulnerable, we let other people know that they're not alone. And it allows other people to stand up taller. We give people a reputation to live up to.
Mm.
Now, I might ride a unicorn, right? I might be completely different, but that's who I am.
Well, and I am, Scott, I'm putting myself in the shoes of a leader. And to start, whether it's in a one-on-one, whether it's stopping by someone's office and truly asking, "So, how are you today?" and really wanting the answer and going beyond the, "Yeah, I'm good." That's my least favorite thing in the world. I'm good,
Hmm.
because I think the majority of time people who are saying "I'm good" are not all good.
Yeah.
So if I'm a leader and I'm thinking about, man, by asking some of these questions, some stuff's going to come out that I don't have the capacity to do anything about, to deal with, to what do you do? It's scary.
It's super well, and I think if you're going to ask that question, I mean, you have to have the time to be able to do it. I mean, people. So inside of the book, I wrote down the really the five senses of a leader. So what people see with their eyes.
Hmm.
So and then what people hear with the words, what people feel, right, and then what they can taste. And I would say taste in regards to affirmation and encouragement. And then ultimately, what they smell is a motive. So, why do you care about me right now? So, not literally smell, but what's going on here?
Right, that intuition.
Yeah. And so, as a leader, is hey, how you doing? And you don't have. So, I would say, if you don't have time, don't ever ask that question because you're going
Mm.
to get words like "I'm fine, I'm good." Because as a leader, if you really do care, you would ask them, "Look, expand on that. Like what, help me. Like use another word for me. Like what is that? Like what's good mean?" Because truly the authentic self will come out in the third question. So what makes your life good right now? Right? And then
Mm.
sometimes it's in the third question that depth comes.
Mhm.
But when you bring something to life like One Morning or any other mental health resources that you have inside your organization as a leader, what you have is you have the ability to say, hey, I'd encourage you to use X. Or have you considered this? So now, as a leader, you're not the therapist. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
But at least you have a resource to be able to say, "Hey, like, can you go that go this direction?" Like, I would encourage you to go do that. That would be my advice.
Mm. So one morning is about storytelling. It's about mental awareness. So a company that's, maybe they have an EAP program. They're just not like who is one morning for, and how do companies utilize that?
Yeah. So 90% of the companies in America have an EAP.
Okay.
Only 20% of the employees know that it exists.
Really?
Yep. And only 4% of people use them.
Whoa.
So one morning sits as it's a catalyst that sits on the front porch of any EAP and nudges people to use them. And then it also on the back porch are a lot of national and community resources, like 988. You know what 988 is?
I don't.
A lot of people don't know what 988 is. It's a national platform. So instead of calling 911, when you're suicidal, so 988 is a suicidal hotline that's available for anyone in the United States. If you're thinking of hurting yourself, you can call and there's a therapist on the other end of the phone. And text 741 is also a text line that that folks, can talk to. 20% of American workers today have thoughts of self-harm or suicide inside the United States, inside of the workplace.
20%.
20%. 23% go to work with anxiety, 20% go to work with deep depression. 76% of American workers have one condition of mental health. Here's something crazy. 84% of them say their employer caused one of them. It's a crazy world we live in. Here's something even worse. 17% of our children are dealing with mental health. 10% of them, if you could get in their book bags or look in their drawers, they've not only thought of suicide, they've actually written down how they would do it. So, I mean, we're living in this deep mental health crisis. And all I want to do is just bring light to it. And I think we can bring light to it through storytelling and just being vulnerable and let people know they're not alone. We're all dealing with something.
Yeah, that's very true. So what does that look like practically? Does a company hire one morning to be a resource? What does that look like for a company?
Yeah. So what we do, we just operationalize that through storytelling. So we would, and we do this. So we would send out kind of an email to the workforce every 3 weeks with just a short story, like an Instagram story. It's just
Mm.
really cool content. And it's a short video between probably 60 and 90 seconds of somebody dealing with something that nudges them, right? Here's a real human being. Like we interviewed someone, a person that I know, Wendy, that got breast cancer. And she was in the pickup line at Kroger's when a nurse calls and tells her, you have cancer. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're in a grocery store parking lot and you find out you have breast cancer. Like,
Ooh.
let's talk about that. And then, hey, what'd you do next? And, what she did is she called her best friend who had breast cancer, right? So she moved.
Hmm.
She didn't stop, she moved.
Hmm.
And so an EAP is not the solution, it's a solution. What the solution is humanity. That's the
Mm.
solution. And so every 3 weeks, we just have a compelling story that nudges people to let them know, hey, and then we build a microsite for every single employer. No login, no password. I don't know about you. I don't want to log in. I don't want another app on my phone.
Yeah.
And it's a microsite for every employer that has all the resources available to every employee. And we push a button and boom, it's done.
Yeah.
Super easy.
Yeah, because I wonder if that's not why some people don't utilize EAPs is, fear of lack of confidentiality,
Oh
and
yeah.
I don't want
Hmm.
people to, which kind of goes against the whole point of, vulnerability and being open. And yet there are some cultures, which I want to talk, I want to get to that a little bit later in our podcast.
Yeah.
Um, but there's that fear of confidentiality, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, there is so much, it's like my chart. There is so much HIPAA information.
Mm.
I mean, if you want handcuffs, breach that. So if you're an employee and you're worried about that, I mean, if there's a law you don't want to break, it's that law. So that EAP, that therapist, there is no way they're gonna breach that. There's
Mm.
just no way. Now, what they might do is if they think you're really going to hurt yourself, they might call 911,
Mm.
right? So if there's threats of serious self-harm to protect you, that would be the only cause for reaching out. But they would, under no circumstances, would they ever call your employer or reach out to your employer or tell
Yeah.
your employer that they
Yeah.
would call you.
That's a really good reminder for people
Mhm.
out there, for our listeners to, don't hesitate. If your company has an EAP, please reach out. Please utilize that. It is confidential. And we also are going to provide in the show notes 988 and 741. I, I'm probably not the only one who has not heard of that. So
Yeah.
we'll make sure that those
And,
resources.
Wendy, they're free. All
Yeah.
those services are free. The
Yeah.
EAP is free. You
Yeah.
call a therapist today. I mean, might take you 10 weeks to get an appointment, and it's like $150. I mean, it's
Yeah.
free.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. Well, I know that you've written a book on, company culture is an inside job, and you feel very passionately about working from the inside out, not the other way around. And it sounds like your work with One Morning could potentially be inspiring another book.
yeah. So, like in my brokenness, when I was really little, I used to love to draw and I used to love to write poetry. And then society told me that little boys don't draw and little boys don't write poetry. But, society didn't tell me that. I went back in time and figured out those were lies that I told myself
Mm.
because I saw other boys do things and I was like, maybe I should do that. So those are lies that I told myself. So in my journey of like like exploration, I got to go back and climb back and sit in my treehouse with, my 8-year-old self. And so I've got kind of a new book on the horizon called A Gentle Walk Back to My Treehouse, where I get to sit, down and spend some time with this 8-year old young guy and kind of sit down and talk to him.
Yeah. It's
So
so
it's
interesting, Scott, because what you're talking about is just resonating so much with me right now, because I gave a keynote speech last September, October, with one of my long-term companies that I've worked with for at least over 10 years. And I just before I got on stage not felt like, I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and there was no question. I was quoting the verse in Revelations where we will overcome by the blood of the Lamb, our sacrifice, and the word of our testimony. And there was just no question. I called my Bible study people and I'm like, okay, y'all need to pray because I think I'm supposed to share my testimony today. And was
Mhm.
like, no, 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 like I'm literally arguing. No, I don't think so. No, I just had a bad dream. I just, I'm rationalizing. And organically, I still, before I took the stage, didn't know what I was going to say, what parts I was going to share. And to use your word, I completely surrendered. And
Yeah.
I shared several things that were points of adversity in my career that really became innovation and became, propelling points for doing things differently in my life. I raised my son on my own. I don't know that I had really ever shared that story with anybody, not to mention 100 people in a keynote speech. And as I started to just share things that I thought were funny, things were victory, things were, hard for sure, people began to cry. Like we literally at one point texted the hotel staff and said, "Hey, we need Kleenexes on our tables." And I'm like, I
Yeah.
didn't ask permission. I didn't apologize. And I had a line of people that night at the gala that wanted to share their story with me. And I couldn't get to everybody. And so I had several calls after that with people who just wanted to share their story. And from that day on, that became part of my purpose is to use my testimony to help other people, number one, realize their potential. And that's really where this podcast came from, is to start to unleash because we have no idea what our potential is. And if we can't get past the things that are holding us back, and number one, be aware, and number two, have a resource, we stay stuck and we stay limited. And so I love what you're talking about, just you sharing your story and how that is manifested into you writing a book and possibly another one, and you retiring and then, starting another company. And so, for our leaders who, not even anybody who's listening, where do they start?
I think the thing is really, and I told this to a lot of young people over my career, is go lead until someone tells you not to. And and you even said this before we even started, is you're equipped whether you know it or not. If it's in your soul, if it's in your heart, it's in your purpose, you're equipped. And I think we're all beautifully made, and God made us each different. And go lead until someone tells you not to. Everybody wants to follow something.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and I believe this too. I have my foundations in life. I have five. Number one, my faith is my foundation. I will not waver. Number two is my wife and I will never part. Number three is I am my own worst enemy and I know it. So I say that because normally the number one thing holding us all back, all of us back, is ourselves. So when we recognize that, it's like when we get this self-talk, there's a quote, I use it all the time. It said, often our brains are like bad neighborhoods and we shouldn't be there alone. You got to get out of your noggin.
Yeah.
You got to get that self-talk, those tapes. I'm not good enough. I'm not thin
Mhm.
enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. And for those listeners, and I've been there and I'm sorry for getting emotional. You have to understand you're enough. No matter where you are, you're enough. You're enough. You're enough. You're enough. And when you start to realize that, and the good book says that we're called to love our neighbor as ourselves. And the problem with that is if we don't love ourselves, humanity doesn't have a shot. And when we learn how to love ourselves, and that's not selfish, it is not selfish to learn how to love ourselves. When we learn how to love ourselves, gosh, the world just shifts.
Mhm.
We turn in what Dr. Seuss says, the land of boom bands. And that's where stuff just gets fun. So that was a long answer to a short
Yeah.
question.
Well, and listening to your TEDx, so interesting because your TEDx was 10 years ago and you were talking about disease and you were talking about the infant mortality rate and your perspective even back then before COVID was we have choice. And for some of us that's empowering. For
Oh
other
yeah.
people, it's a little scary because we want to blame somebody else for where we are and we want to deflect and so unpack that a little bit for us and where you were 10 years ago in terms of our choice and where you are today.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting thing for me because I began to look at, the country, we spend $4 trillion in healthcare,
Hmm.
which is, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And we've built a healthcare system in this nation that's built because of us, not for us. And I'll say that again. This healthcare system in America is built because of us, not for us. And when we start taking care of ourselves, the concrete trucks will stop driving and they'll stop pouring concrete, and this healthcare system has to change. And as an example, last year in America, we filled 6.7 billion prescriptions, billion, for 330 million Americans. Now, there's 30 pills in every jar. Okay. And as a third of prescriptions never get filled. We filled 6.7 billion, and a third of them never got filled. Threw them away, couldn't afford them. We could give every belly button on this planet 15 pills for what we chew, eat, and swallow in the United States. So we have 5% of the world's population, and we consume 80% of every drug made on this planet.
80%?
Yeah, we are a hot mess. We are, us and New Zealand are the only country that allows direct consumer advertising on TV. The rest of the world does not allow it. And we are consumed with prescription drugs, consumed with them. I was watching the fireworks with my wife, and there was this couple behind us, and I didn't see them. And the one lady goes, how much weight have you lost? She goes, I lost 80 pounds. It's the greatest thing in the world. I'm taking, I forget what it was, that diabetic pen.
Mm-hmm.
And I can eat whatever I want. I don't have to exercise. It's the greatest thing in the world. I was like, holy smokes, holy smokes, holy smokes. So that TEDx it was all about that. So like, how do we change the inside of us?
Mm-hmm.
And it's important because unless this changes, the outside isn't going to change. And we can take a pill. I mean, I took Prozac, and I have nothing against antidepressants, and I'll say that because there's a lot of people, and they can be very effective for many people. But 1 in 5 people in the United States are on antidepressant, so I think too many people are taking them. But some people really need them. And then I had a propensity to overspend, right? And I read the bottle one day, and it said you could overspend on this medication, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me! I
Really?
never read it. Then I was on another drug, Effexor, XR, and I stopped taking it. I didn't read it. I didn't read the bottle. And honestly, one Thanksgiving, I got very depressed, and I called a friend of mine who was a psychiatrist, and I said, "Look, I've got some really bad thoughts." And I told him what I did, and he said, "Come over." And he said, "I want you to read this bottle. You're supposed to taper off Effexor." I didn't know that. And I read it, and he read it with me, and he said, "If you don't taper off, thoughts of suicide." I'm like, "Holy smokes!" Like I didn't read any. Does that make sense? I didn't read
Yeah.
any of that. But here's the issue for me personally. I wanted an outside source to fix the inside of me.
Mm.
And that wasn't going to happen. What was going to happen is hard, deep, compelling inner work. Going back to that treehouse and sitting down with that 8-year-old cat saying, hey, who did you want to be? Let's start all over. And so that TEDx was really around, could technology like phones teach us, to do things differently? Could Fitbits teach us to do things differently, drive us to intuitively do things differently? And that TEDx was so much fun. That was a blast.
It was really great. I mean, 12 minutes of just powerful questions that I just went, "Oh, am I using technology? Am I getting to the root of my health? Like every day I wake up and I'm just so grateful to be healthy. And yet, there's a lot of days I go, yeah, I'm not going to do the walk. Yeah, going to make different eating choices. And if that continues, obviously, choice matters. And it's so interesting. What hit me, Scott, as I was listening to your TEDx is we have more information at a greater speed than we have ever had. And yet we are taking more prescription drugs. We are less healthy. We are more obese. The list goes on than we have ever been. And yet we have information, we have choice. We know you eat better, you exercise, you lessen your probability of being sick and disease. And it's
Yeah.
amazing how we're empowered to do so, and we don't need to be empowered.
Yeah. I mean, we are just, it is, it was someone once said, it is just, we are the second heaviest developed nation in the world behind Mexico. We have the highest infant mortality rate of any developed nation. I mean, we are just so much better than all of that. And it just blows me away to just why is that? High fructose corn syrup, and you think about all the things that we've done. I mean, my parents and my grandparents ate a lot more food than I did, but their food was much different than my food. I mean, here's a great example. My grandchildren, I love my grandkids. We should have had them first.
How many do you have, Scott?
I have 3 and 1 on the way. They're awesome. Wow. But it is very likely they will eat roughly 300 pounds of sugar a year. And my parents and grandparents might eat 20 pounds when they grew up. Mm-hmm. That's why we have just an epidemic diabetic rate. I mean, it's just epidemic. We have children today growing up having type 2 diabetes. Kids.
Yep.
That used to happen to seniors.
Mm-hmm.
We have children getting type 2 diabetes. And as parents, I mean, I just, that's just epically irresponsible. Mm-hmm. I mean, just epically irresponsible.
Yeah.
And it's just, and we're better than that. Which I just know we are.
Yeah.
I just know we are. And, the food industry could, unfortunately, it's a lot cheaper to make bad food and it stays around long. I mean, you could put a Twinkie on the moon and we could go up there. Apparently, when Elon wants us to go up there, we could probably eat it 50 years from now and it probably tastes the same.
Yeah.
So
terrifying.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, all of your passion around self-awareness and vulnerability and, looking at the statistics in terms of our health in the US, I'm curious how that all led to you doing leadership and culture work. Is it the same concept of self-awareness and vulnerability and creating a culture around this? So talk to us about what was the transition from healthcare to company culture and leadership?
Gosh, well, it's another bad story.
We learn from our failures,
I
right?
know. It's a good one. So 25 years ago, I'm in my office. I'm a high performing salesperson, individual. I call it an individual contributor. And there's a big difference between an individual contributor and a leader. And I was what's referred to as a destructive hero. So a founder's kid, which is a dangerous position to be, or a very high performer. I had an assistant. Her name was Victoria. She came in my office and she said, "You have values painted on the wall. You don't exhibit one of them. And I have my own set of values and you torque them every day. Today's my last day." So my initial reaction was, the door was open. How many people just heard that? And then my second reaction was, how do I make sure no one else knows what just happened? Because my ego was that gigantic. So I asked her, "Hey, could we talk about this in the morning?" She said, "Maybe." So I called her that night and she came back in the morning. And when I sat there at night, I was more worried about what people would think about me with her leaving than her leaving. Does that make sense?
It does.
Which is kind of a sick thought. So I went back in the morning and said, "Hey, look, I mean, obviously there's a lot of things that I'm good at, but there's a lot of things that I'm bad at. If I hired a coach and I gave you access to that coach So I gave him their phone number and I gave you their plan. Would you give me a shot? Like, would you give me a chance? And she said, I'll give you a chance. And then we agreed that every day we'd ask each other three questions. This was awesome. And it was, I am okay. Am I okay? Are you okay? Are we okay? Every day. Am I okay? Are you okay? Are we okay? And we worked through that. And I hired this coach. He was awesome. And my ego was just huge. It was gigantic. It was just massive. It was so materialistic. It was all of that. And I had no capacity to what it looked like to inspire and lead a team. I knew how to make money. I knew how to be a chameleon. I knew how to talk to a CEO. I knew how to talk to an engineer. I sold loose diamonds in New York City. I mean, I knew how to navigate. I was good. I mean, I knew how to do that. But to be authentic and to be available, I wrote a poem one time called "Never Alone, Always Lonely." I didn't know how to be alone. And so that was the beginning journey of self-awareness was Victoria. The cool thing is she retired a year behind me. So I got to wheel her out to my car. We had this victory cart at McGohan Brabender. It's a big cart, four wheels. We wheel people around. You ring a bell. I got to wheel her out to the front seat of her car on the victory cart. So she was, if you're a leader out there, then the number one thing you need in your company is a truth teller, someone that's willing to tell you the truth, the honest truth. And then you have to ask yourself, are you willing to accept it?
That's right.
Like, if you can, you really, there's a difference between admitting the truth
Mm.
and then accepting the truth. There's a chasm between those two.
Mm.
And fortunately, she was brave enough to come in and tell a founder's kid. That's brave.
That is
That's
brave.
a brave, brave thing to do. So every company has a destructive hero.
Mm.
If you don't know who it is, it might be you. And what I tell companies is do the math. So think about all the people that surround themselves talking about this high performer, add up all the salaries, add up all the time you think about talking about this person, add up all the body bags that you've had to zip up because of this person inside your organization.
Mm-hmm.
And you're probably a third of the way there.
Wow.
And so give destructive heroes a chance. And if they don't move, just get rid of them as fast as you can. They are absolutely toxic to your company.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hear you talk about your quote unquote massive ego, and I had a
Mhm.
conversation recently with one of my mentors, and I'm encouraging him to be an executive coach because people need his storytelling, his authenticity, he's just so passionate about building companies, and he's so good at it. And he literally laughed at me and he said, "Wendy, absolutely not." And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Because too many leaders are more interested in being right than getting it right."
Mm-hmm.
And that really hit me. And I've thought about that so often. We should be, we have the opportunity to be better companies than we've ever been because the amount of information that is about out there about emotional intelligence and being an empathetic leader and humility and integrity and intention and all of these things. And yet, Scott, the statistics I'm reading are just not showing that in leadership, we are moving the needle at all.
Oh yeah.
So, what do
Hmm.
we do?
Yeah, Gallup just did a study. Your listeners can look it up. It just came out. Gallup
I love Gallup.
did did a study worldwide. What people want most in leaders. You want to guess what it is? They want hope.
Oh, I'd say, I
They,
was going to say empathy, hope.
yeah, all they want is hope. So as a leader, there's, in my opinion, the only way you can give people hope is you have to slow down. You don't have to go as fast as you think you have to go. And you just have to be available. As the leader inside the organization, you have to understand that if you've hired the right team, if you've got the right people in place, those people can do amazing, beautiful work. And you can spend time really growing and nurturing your people. That's what I did at McGo. I mean, I had great people. And then I could only probably sit at my desk for maybe 30 minutes or so. And then I'd just go bounce like Tigger. I would just go bounce.
Yeah.
And I would just be around with people, not in their roles. So I wouldn't tell people what to do. I would just be available with people.
Mhm.
And that's what I love to do. And that's part of a leader's responsibility is to be with the people, to encourage them, to inspire them, to be available with them. But if your door's shut and you're working on strategy all the time, I mean, and and you're running a million miles an hour because you think it makes you look like a hero, you got a cape on, you know, it is, people, I mean, you know what you end up doing? Honestly, you wear people out.
Mm.
So if you're all in a race and everyone's running, people just go to the stands and they sit in the bleachers and they just clap and they're just like, look at that guy. He wears me out. That's exhausting.
Mm.
No one's running with you anymore. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I had someone on my podcast recently, and her definition of burnout was not working a bunch of hours. It was about not being fulfilled in the hours that we're working. And I
Mm,
think we can all probably relate to that so well. And unfortunately, I do believe you're exactly right that that starts with leadership.
mhm. Yeah, I ask people a lot when I speak about my book who the CEO of Kroger's is. Do you know who the CEO of Kroger's is?
I don't.
Yep. I've done that speech probably 50 times. Nobody knows. That book is written up in Good to Great. It's one of the greatest companies in America. And I don't know who the CEO of Kroger's is. I've never looked it up because it's not about that person. I don't know if it's a male. I don't know if it's about a female. It's about an organization that has great leadership. And when I think of organizations like, and I'm going to say this, but like Amazon, everybody knows who founded Amazon. I'd buy their stock. I would never work for that guy
Hmm.
ever, right? Because it's all about him.
Yep,
And then I can go through a myriad of companies that are all about him or her,
it's true.
mostly hymns. I can't think of a her company. Um, but when it's all about the individual, it is just, it's very destructive. When
Mhm.
it's about the organization and it's about the people, then look out, world. We're going
Yeah,
to put a dent in it.
yeah. Well, Scott, you are doing such amazing work out there, and we could just this could be a 3-hour podcast for sure. And I'm sure that there's so much that we haven't even dug into. So I will make sure that all of your information is in the show notes. As we start to close, I'm just curious when you look back, I don't know that you'll ever retire because I think you're like me, Energizer Bunny, and I don't think I could ever retire. As you continue to look back though, on your career and also on your impact. What's a couple of things? Because I don't think we can narrow it down to one thing. What are a couple of things that you hope people will remember about what the impact and the imprint is that you've left on this world?
I think probably, I hope it is just authenticity,
Mm.
just authentic. I think it's definitely just the vulnerability and not being afraid, just super brave. And then and really, I say it a lot is like my faith, it just means the world to me.
Mm.
And he's the number one I think about. He's the number one thing I think about in the morning, and I know it's him because I'm not that good,
Mm.
so I know it's him. And he's carried me this far, so by golly. And it's and that is that's I hope that goes to my grandkids. I hope it goes to my
Mm.
son and my daughter and other people that I deeply care about. So um, those are the things that I hope for in my
Mm.
life. So thanks for
Yeah.
asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and some of the things, I mean, I have a list of things that I've written down that I'm taking away. One of those is being brave. Both as a leader of a company, to be brave, to be vulnerable, to ask the question, to choose to get out of your office and open your door. I know it's scary. I know it's risky. I know. And that takes a brevity at that level, also to be brave as someone who is within an organization to say, hey, this isn't an organization that I want to work with. I certainly don't want to work with you. I mean,
Mm.
that takes courage. And
Oh
yet
yeah.
so often I hear story after story that that's where change starts to take place. And so, in all levels of the organization, change can take place by asking a question, by sharing, by being vulnerable. I would encourage people who, are personal leaders within organizations to choose to be the change and choose to take the risk to say something. And so, there's so many messages that we've gotten out of this today. So, first of all, Scott, I just want to thank you for that. I always like to leave our listeners with a couple of action items. So, a lot of this sounds good, and whether it's a leader or whether it's an individual contributor, where do they start today?
A really good exercise would be to get super, super quiet. I mean,
Mm,
really quiet. So go to a really quiet place. And I'm a big fan of journaling. So you would just get quiet and just imagine you're at a place where two of your colleagues are, and they're just kind of talking about their work environment. And one of them asks them about you. What's it like to work with Scott?
mm,
And I want you to really physically write down honestly what they would say. Things like, he's too fast, he's never available, and I wish he had time for me, or whatever. But you have to be brutally honest. And then below that, write down what you wish that person would say: that he was available, that he made eye contact with me, that he knew my kids' names, that he spent time with me, that he encouraged me, that he gave me hope. And get super honest about that gap, because there's a gap. I have a gap today. We all have a gap. But
yeah.
some of us, that gap is wide. And here's what's even worse: that gap in your family is even wider. Some of us have a better relationship at work than we do with our family. And that's
Mm,
really sad.
mm,
But deeply think around what you think people would say about you and what you want to, and then start behaving like that person beneath. Start behaving that.
mm.
And then the other exercise is, and this is brave, man, is go look in the mirror. The mirror's a wonderful place to find a friend. And you need, now I'm not talking about brushing your teeth and combing your hair. I'm talking about looking in the eyes of the soul of the person looking back.
Mm,
And it's awkward, but there will be a time and a place where you can look back at that person and you can like that person and you can call that person a friend, and you won't pick on that person anymore. You won't say that you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not thin enough. You can tell yourself you're good enough and I'm proud of you. And so those are two things that are probably what I would say are really good pieces of advice.
yeah, such good advice. And it's free.
And it's free.
All all of that is free.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of being willing and open enough to, number one, confront the truth. And I
Yep.
think, in every 12-step program or, any
Mhm.
program that there is in change and getting better, it starts with number one, being honest and being self-aware and willing to do something with it. So such a great exercise. And the ripple of that exercise, both of those exercises.
Oh, yeah. It'll just, yeah. I've got a great story with that, but I know we got to wrap up, but it's
Oh,
killer.
no, tell it.
Well, so I did this inner city program with inner city kids, and I did it for years. And I had these CEOs teach inner city kids how to play golf. And every week we would tell them a story about something that we did. So one week was honesty.
Mm,
And so I remembered when I was little, I played in a golf. This is a bad story about me again. I played in a golf tournament, and I remember the trophy. So I went in my garage and this box, and I found this trophy, and it was first place for this trophy. And I cheated to beat a girl in this golf tournament. So I'm telling these students around the fact that sometimes our mistakes can hold on to us forever. And this mistake has always held on to me. But I don't use my past to torture myself. I use my past to be useful to all of you.
right.
This brave girl stood up. Her name's Rhonda. She stood up. She rose her hand. She was a junior at Chaminade Julian High School. She said, "That's not yours. You need to give it back." And once again, I said, I don't use my past. She said, Scott, that's admirable, but it's not yours. You need to give it back. I said, okay, I'll try to find Rhonda. And I didn't want to find Rhonda. So I leave, and I'm at this country club I belong to, and I'm talking to the golf pro, and I'm telling him the story. He's laughing. I go, what's so funny? He goes, her brother's my next door neighbor. I'm like, oh, great God. This is great. The name of the girl, her name was Sue Stump. So I call her brother. And I'm like, hey, I need to call your sister. And he said, why do you need her number? I'm like, oh, I got to tell him the story. So I tell him the story. He starts laughing. He goes, you know what she does for a living? I'm like, no. And he's like, well, she is the head golf coach at South Florida State University. Okay. I'm like, God, this is getting pretty funny. So I call her and I'm like, Sue, you don't remember me, but we played in this golf tournament together. And I'm doing this inner city program. And I'm telling this story about how I cheated in this tournament to beat you. And I remember walking with my mom and dad by you. And I remember walking by you, and I wasn't brave enough to hand it back to you. And I've never forgotten it. And I told that story to these children, and I'm sorry. And she said, oh my gosh, Scott, like cheating in college golf is epic. Can I tell that story to other students? I'm like, oh my, it's your story. Heck yes. So anyway, long story short, I'm like, Sue, can I fly you to Dayton? Can I give you this story back? Can I give you this trophy back at this banquet in front of Rhonda? So she calls me back like a month later. She says, look, I've got to go recruit this golfer. I can't, but my mom still lives in Dayton and she wants to be there. So I go to this event and I'm at the podium. I mean, the mayor's there, TV station, my parents, my wife, 100 people there. And I'm there and I'm accepting and I've got this trophy and I'm reading this letter to her mom and I can't read it. This brave girl, Rhonda, comes up. She puts her arm around me. It's a podium. And she said, hey, Coach Scott, we can do this together. And so we read this letter to Sue and we hand the trophy to Rhonda. And I'm going to show you something up here. Do you see that trophy right there?
I do.
Yeah. Rhonda reaches under the podium. And she said, Coach Scott, and I might cry. I'm going to cry. She said, the first trophy you stole, that one you earned. And this is for you. And I've never forgotten that. Mm. And at the end of the day, I thought I'd like healed from that, right? And I was being useful and teaching other people. And what I realized at the end of the day is when we're vulnerable and we begin to teach people, like more than ourselves, just get healed. Beautiful, incredible things happen. Am I proud that I beat a girl? Cheated a bit? No, I am not proud of that at all. But in my life, I am not hiding from anything. Mm. I can walk anywhere. Does that make sense?
Such freedom.
So sorry for going on for.
No, please do not apologize. Yeah. I think that's such a great story for us to end on because I know that I myself, I resonate with that. And I know that there are so many people storytelling real life. Our testimony is where true change happens. And it's other people's testimonies that change us. So I appreciate your willingness to share not just your wins, share times that your ego was so big, you couldn't get past it. And times when you cheated. And, I think back to my life and I think the majority of the things that I have learned have been through my failures, not my successes. So right. I just so appreciate you allowing us to learn from your mistakes, from the things you have become self-aware of. And now you are helping others to experience those successes through things that they need to do different. Wow, so I appreciate you so much. And so, Scott, thank you for being a part of Unleashed today and for making every single one of us who are listening to this better. And again, I will make sure that your information is in the show notes. What is the best way for people to contact you, Scott?
It's scott@onemorning.com.
Okay.
That is the easiest way. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, all of that.
Very good. Well, we will put all of that in the show notes. So once again, Scott, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, Wendy, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to Unleash with Wendi Swanson. Make sure to subscribe and follow to be notified when the newest episodes of the podcast go live. Please take a moment to rate and review us. It helps others discover Unleashed and join our movement of forward-thinking leaders. You can find contact information and important links in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode, and remember, keep leading with authenticity, embrace change, and choose to live life unleashed.